Oi oi, it's your boy, Slacky J, and it's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you after possibly the worst weekend of fights in living memory. There might be some more, I'd have to check the records, go back, look at the old Doomsday book, but unbelievably shit weekend of fights, and I'm really hoping no one, because sometimes I'm down on the fights and people turn up and say, Jack, you're so cynical, blah blah blah, or did you not see so and so on the undercard, they were pretty good. This pair of cards, Bellator and the UFC, absolutely sucked. I'll do the UFC first because the Bellator was worse and I'll probably get more laughs out of it, but the UFC card was Johnny Walker versus Thiago Santos as the main event. This is one of about 4 really bad headliners in a row. Hold on, I'm going to check them. So after the Volkanovski-Ortega pay-per-view, it's Santos Walker, then it's Mackenzie Dern versus someone Rodriguez, then Holly Holm versus Norma Dumont, then it's Costa versus Vittori, which sounds good, but they seem to be phoning it in for the rest of that card as well. Basically what you're seeing is that the UFC has a TV deal, and they've realized that it doesn't matter if they do good things or shit things, so they're just not booking any good fights, and they're trying to load up the pay-per-views. And it's weird because I swear the pay-per-views aren't getting any better. They're just, you get some good fights, but you're still going really, is that pay-per-view worthy? It's the WWE problem. The money's guaranteed no matter how bad the product gets. You won't see a change for a very long time because it'll take 6 or 7 years of them doing shit fights back to back to back for people to stop watching, and for the ESPN themselves to be like, stop that, put good fights on. And the real downside is that every time it seems like Bellator is going to do something big, or basically there is no competitor for the UFC, and all the people who the media are trying to move into position to being competitor, like ONE FC, Bellator, PFL less so, but those 3 just keep putting on shit cards and doing rubbish. And Rising, don't even get me fucking started on Rising. Rising had an event this weekend called Rising Landmark, which is apparently one of a series of events they're going to be doing in this Landmark series. That it's called Landmark because there are no stadiums open in Tokyo at the moment, or in Japan generally. So what they're doing is they're setting these. They said they were going to set these fights at random landmarks, or carefully chosen landmarks, but landmarks nonetheless. And I was like, that sounds interesting. Then I looked at the card and it's like Mikuru Asakura, because he's basically Jake Paul, but for Japan. He's got a huge YouTube following and he just happens to also be a fighter. So they have Mikuru Asakura in the main event against someone, and then 3 other fights that you don't really care about. One of them has Masakazu Imanari, who's 45 now. So I was like, I'm not that interested by the card, but I am interested by the idea. I want to see this. And then, just following on Twitter, because I couldn't find a way to get a hold of Rising. You have to go through their Japanese site. It's got language in the top right corner, and you select the American flag. Still shows it all in Japanese. So I'm trying to work out how to order this shit. They've partnered with some TV company over there. So to order this 4-fight card, you have to pay $35 to them, this random company. And then I'm checking on Twitter to see what the Weeb crew are saying. And firstly, I found out, one, it's in the storm drains in Saitama. And if you've ever seen photos of the Tokyo storm drains or the Saitama storm drains, any of their big metro area storm drains, they're incredible. So I was like, that's a really cool idea. And then in the same tweet, it was like, but no one could watch it because they've botched the fucking streaming service. So I've seen about 3 still images of this Rising event, which looks cool, but I said it earlier on Twitter, but they've basically done the Kumite by accident. They want people to watch their fights. They don't want them to be a secret, but they've managed to do it accidentally. So Sakakibara as the nemesis to Dana, not buying it. I think he got lucky with Pride, as I think Scott Coker got lucky with Strikeforce. But anyway, this shitty UFC card had Santos versus Walker as the main event, and people were like, there's no way that won't be fun. Wouldn't you know it? It wasn't fun. They turned up and fainted at each other for 25 minutes. And this is the thing, specifically calling back to that person the other week who asked about bullshit volume and if it's the future of MMA. with regards to Alexander Volkanovski, Israel Adesanya, people who use a lot of feints. If you look at the stats for the Brian Ortega fight, not only does he land a lot of blows, because Brian Ortega is not great defensively, but he throws an awful lot of real strikes. He threw something like 350 strikes and landed at a 60% clip, which is pretty good. Johnny Walker feinted about 40 strikes and landed 20. So it's just tragic. Just tragic. I mean, Thiago Santos was the same. They just did nothing, stared at each other, landed the odd run-up low kick. But the feints didn't look anything like the real attacks. And that's the key. You're trying to trick someone. If the feints look nothing like the real attacks and the real attacks look nothing like the feints, you're not going to trick anyone. And if you're not actually throwing any real attacks, you're definitely not tricking anyone. So people have all been laying into Kavanagh because he was in Johnny Walker's corner. Last time it was Faraz. So he's had a couple of famous coaches now. He's gone to famous places and still not got any better and probably gotten worse. But yes, Kavanagh was in the corner between rounds being like, yes, more feints, perfect. Feint, feint, feint. If he comes at you, walk off and then feint some more. Like, there was no emphasis on, but you do need to land some strikes though. And so everyone and their mum has been like dragging Kavanagh this week. Got lucky with Conor McGregor, blah, blah, blah. But isn't he a BJJ coach and Conor McGregor's a striker, so he probably didn't have much to do with it. I don't know if that's like got any bearing on it, but there haven't been a lot of great fighters out of SBG Ireland. A lot of them got to the UFC, but by merit of knowing Conor McGregor, they got the treatment that lad the other week who knew Nick Diaz got. But no, there's been some good grapplers out there. Paddy Holohan's good. Cathal Pendrid, Artem Lobov. But yeah, I mean, they're an all right gym. It's just that they've had like a multi-million-pound cash injection. So where they used to train in like basically a glorified shed when they were starting out, they now have this amazing facility and fame. So there should be more talent coming out of there soon. But you don't know how much is legitimate because Bellator will snap up anything with SBGI on it to just be like, yes, Conor McGregor might show up and jump the fence at some point. But yes, no, it was a strange game plan. But then Thiago Santos was operating the same game plan. Ultimately led to a dreadful fight. And basically it was like, what if everyone in MMA tried to use the feints and the new feint meta and didn't understand how feints actually play into the rest of the game? It's like this did happen. Like as soon as the Danaher Death Squad were blowing up, dudes were just grabbing legs and falling back constantly. And now we have like great leg lockers from all over the world who are implementing it in their game and using it, to as part of a rounded grappling game. It hasn't made people like the one-dimensional leg lock chasers that everyone expected them to become. But there were still a lot of people who were just grabbing legs and being like, yeah, as Matt Serra would say, am I part of the death squad? So it's a bit like that with the feints. But anyway, I've lingered on that fight way too long, and it's lingered like a bad fart. What else was on this card? Oh yeah, that was the other hilarious thing. Co-main event, Kevin Holland, Kyle Daukus. Kyle Daukus tries to take him down a couple of times. Holland manages to stop him, talks to DC while he's doing it. Holland steps into punch. Daukus ducks in, headbutt to the jaw, and basically knocks Holland out. Very interesting because the fight is allowed to continue. And this happened the other week with, what's it called? I'll follow you home, bitch. What was her name? Bayans? I can't remember. But that lass who scored the upkick knockout, and the ref looked out of the cage while she was beating on the near unconscious body of her opponent to be like, run that back to the guy on the replay. So you basically let the fight play out, and then if it was illegal, you go back and change the result. It's a very strange way to do it. But then I suppose the other thing that you could do is stop the fight, and then if you've called it and it isn't a headbutt, you've just cost him a knockout that he probably would have scored from a legitimate strike. So ultimately not super interesting because it happened quite early in round one. But it did give me a chance to post a load of headbutts on Twitter in a headbutt thread because I love a good headbutt. A cheeky nodder. This one was not particularly cheeky because you're not supposed to get caught. But I did previously say no one will ever get caught for headbutting in the UFC unless you're doing it on the ground, very obviously. So yeah, it was impressive that they actually caught that and counted it. Because people have been knocked down and then finished off headbutts before in the UFC, and it's not like it's not even come up. I fucking it's in Bellator, but Melvin Gillard versus Derek Campos is the one I'm always talking about because it's the biggest name on Derek Campos' record. But he basically just headbutted him while he was coming forward and then knocked him down and beat on him for the rest of the fight. And Melvin Gillard's team should have appealed that. That is exactly the kind of fight that you want to take to the board. Except there isn't a board, it's an athletic commission. But, you want to take it to the people upstairs because that is literally, you've been cost the fight by, not if it's deliberate, if it isn't deliberate, doesn't matter. It was a foul that caused the fight to change direction. But everything else in this card was shit. Alexander Hernandez knocked out a guy who was in at late notice, and a couple of people were like, "Oh my god, do you remember how good Alexander Hernandez is?" And you're like, "Come on, Antonina Shevchenko lost to Casey O'Neill. Hilarious, managed to almost get twisted from standing. There was a line someone said on Reddit a while ago. Well, I suppose Antonina's last fight, but it made me laugh a lot in the way where I felt bad for laughing, but I also thought it was a great line, so I'm going to repeat it. He said, Coach Pavel groomed one and trained the other, which is brutal, but the skill divide between the two sisters is ridiculous, and then it is also super creepy that their coach, who's known them both since childhood, married one of them. Bejko Haya came in overweight for her fight, not complaining because the girl had an ass like I've never seen. I had to do it. I had to do it one time because she's leaving. She's done. She's retired. The only really good things on this card, I mean, Alejandro Perez is always funny. I can't believe it's been like 3 years since I last saw him fight, but he fought Johnny Eduardo, who's also been out for a long time, and he gave us another amazing weigh-in. I don't know what it is about him. He's so awkward. He doesn't know what to do with his hands, so he's like, he's got his hands all over the place, like Luke Rockhold when they show him in the crowd. Throw up some gang signs and then be like, oh no, did I just throw up gang signs? Am I going to be murdered? Better change it. It's a peace sign now. Oh no, now it's a thumbs up. Now I'm trying to put my arm around Nate Diaz, but he doesn't notice. Oh, I'm going to stop. Just chronic awkwardness. He's got clinical awkwardness, this man. But then his striking is like that. He moves very strangely. But he scored an armbar victory. And I say armbar, like he tried to step across the back armbar with the whizzer earlier on when Eduardo was coming up with the underhook from the bottom, which I thought was cool. But the actual armbar he won with was the one that Casey O'Neill also almost scored on Antonina Shevchenko. It's what I call the lady armbar because it happens a lot in women's MMA. The old scarf hold, push their wrist down between your legs, and then you either straight armbar it over your thigh or you Americana it over your thigh, depending on how they squirm. Douglas Silva de Andrade landed a beautiful counter left hook. I'm going to keep talking about how counter left hooks are changing the game, but he landed it as this guy was stepping up into a high kick. Again, we talked last week about stepping up into kicks, and if you get caught when your feet are under you, it's going to be bad. And then Jamie Malarkey was the only good thing on this card, in my humble opinion, against Devontae Smith. He looked like he's made some changes in his camp, in his training. He's trying to strike more scientifically. It did, but Devontae Smith read him quite well because Jamie Malarkey was trying to slip punches and use his head movement to stay in range. And what happens when you do that is you have to spread your feet a little bit so you can move your weight from one foot to the other. And in the course of that, you, make yourself low kickable. So if you watch like Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler 1, Johnny Hendricks is slipping a lot, so Robbie Lawler... Oh, no, other way around. Robbie Lawler's slipping a lot, so Johnny Hendricks just lands hard low kicks on the end of each 5-punch combination. And your legs you're in a deep stance, so your legs are probably quite braced, but it does mean you can like dig into the muscle and you're not going to have to worry about them picking it up and checking. You're probably just not going to jar on the knee, is what I'm saying, by like your feet are braced in a stance. That tends to happen if you kick someone while they're moving. But the other thing is that obviously the guy can reach out and grab your head, and what Devontae Smith was doing was throwing 2 or 3 punches. Once he missed his right hand, he'd drop it on the back of Malarkey's neck, grab a collar tie and start kneeing. But Jamie Malarkey toughed it out, looked great, started to get back into it, used the clinch along the fence well to start striking from situations where Devontae Smith wasn't going to be able to pull his head away or move out of range. If you're at a speed disadvantage, using footwork correctly to get guys in position or just literally shoving them to the fence taking away their retreat, makes it a lot easier. And then a beautiful left hook to the body finished it, which I loved. Well, no, actually, that started the finish. He hit him with a 1-2-3 left hook to the body. Guy crunches over. He throws like 4 or 5 punches to the head again. And I was like, oh, is he going to get blinkers here? Because I've seen so many guys do that. They land a great body shot. The guy looks on the edge of being finished. And they're like, never go back to the body, punch the head 80 times and then tire myself out. But he did. He did. Well, I mean, if I'm second-guessing him, if I'm going, he's forgotten about the body. Devontae Smith's probably going, he's forgotten about the body. And then he cracked him with another body shot, put him down, you know, the kind where you just want to curl up and cry once you've been hit by it. So Jamie Malaukus, great lad. I mean, he always was tough, which is something that we always commended on him on, like famously the Brad Riddell fight. Took a beating, took a kicking and kept ticking, or a licking and kept ticking, whatever the correct phrase is. But in this one, he actually looked pretty sharp. You know, still some issues, still not an amazing technician, but I really liked it. And everything else was shit. Bellator. Right, let's lay into this because it was bloody funny. Right, so I talked about this on the Boycast. I put out a preview of the MVP versus Lima fight for the plebs, for my normal followers. And I said I thought I said I thought the MVP's probably in position to take it this time. Lima's been doing less and less, being less and less active. I think I called it a touch of the Woodleys. But yeah, I was actually surprised Lima came out and pushed forwards, which was good because, you know, he has been putting his back on the fence and fucking around for too long, like his brother. And then this fight was kind of uneventful. I mean, a lot of people were really angry about how uneventful it was. I thought it was just sort of getting cooking, and I really would have liked 2 more rounds, like I would like any time I see world-class fighters, you know, top 10 guys fighting, or guys who are near a title shot. If it was a title eliminator, fucking 5 rounds, mate. But Bellator doesn't do that, even if it's the main event. But it was an interesting fight because it brought up something that I think we talked about quite recently, actually, hitting people while they're on one leg, you know, the counter right hand to the right low kick. And I said, it's great because if you do that, you've got a great chance of knocking them over. And in kickboxing, that probably won't be scored as a knockdown. But in MMA, people really do think that's a knockdown, when in fact it's a takedown with no control. And that was the danger. Lima was coming forward trying to kick the leg as Page came in. And if he timed it wrong, Page would bump into him and knock him over because he was on one leg. That happened 3 times in the first round, I think it was, or 3 times throughout the fight. And each time, John McCarthy was like, that's a knockdown. You know, and you're reminded, this is the dude who wrote the rules, and he doesn't know what a knockdown is. But, I mean, he was insufferable all night. They've got him with some other new person instead of Mauro now, but he was very, very bad, and he remains very, very bad. And it's even worse because he keeps coming out, like, he's doing the DC thing, where every day you go on Twitter, and the first thing you're greeted with is either him tweeting it himself or a news story about how he's come out against something that everyone agrees about anyway. Like, you know, it's DC is always coming out being like, I don't agree with what John Jones has done, but maybe it's my fault for not making him look in the mirror or some shit like that. You're like, oh, you're so brave, DC. Thanks. DC comes out against delivering death threats from your back with a broken leg. You know, it's just, I mean, he's a big pro wrestling fan, so he probably loves the cheap heat. You know, it's like coming out and going, you know, I heard you like to rock in check back of guitar, Boston, you know. But yeah, Big John was bad. So then the takedowns, Lima timed a really good takedown in the first round, and I tweeted, like, I wouldn't have felt comfortable going for that because Page loves his flying knees. You know, I would have, if I were Page, I'd be trying to set the trap of having him duck onto a flying knee. But he got this takedown, got to the ground in the first round. Michael Page controls his wrists. Lima lands fucking nothing. It was literally the first fight. After the first, like, bundled knockdowns, quote-unquote knockdowns, it was the first fight again, the first round. And then they came out for the second round. Lima times the low kick. Page falls, catches himself on his hands and tries to bounce up too quickly, literally as we talked about from the last fight, last time. And it was almost identical. Swings the bus driver uppercut, says, guess who's going to jail? But, in fact, MVP was not going to jail. And then the rest of the fight happened and everyone was very disappointed because they wish it had ended there. So basically, rest of the second round was Michael Page trying to bounce around and land stuff. Lima trying to land the odd low kick. And then in the third round, Lima got a takedown. And again, it was Michael Page holding the wrist. Lima managed to get enough elevation to turn over a good elbow and land a couple of good blows at the end of that third round. I don't think anyone did anything except for that elbow at the end of the first round, so I would give it to Lima. Sorry, third round. Give it to Lima on that. But it was incredibly frustrating because, like, most people who were watching this either felt like no one deserved to win or felt like Lima probably edged it. They gave the decision to Michael Page. They told him, it seems, before the decision was announced, because his demeanor changes immediately before they read the final card. But it's amazing because, like, clearly, if he'd lost this one, he'd have gone like, "Oh yeah, no, I made some mistakes there, blah blah blah." But he won it, so he was like, "Oh yes, now I feel like I'm unbeatable, blah blah." And you're like, you sat underneath this dude for a full round, not even trying to get up. Like, you weren't attacking, you weren't doing anything. You were just holding his wrists, which is impressive. It's impressive that you've got big hands and strong tendons in your hands that you can do that without gassing your fucking grip out. But the champion is Amasov. He's going to try and take you down. And if all you do is lay there, he will win the fight, probably, over 5 rounds. Yeah, it was absolutely desperate guard play. I say guard play. It wasn't even really guard play. It was stalling from a disadvantaged position and literally looking at the ref. Like, in a 15-minute fight, any world-class fighter, if you take them down into closed guard, is going to open their guard and start getting up. And he was more concerned with holding the closed guard and stalemating it than actually making stuff happen and getting back to where he had his best chance of winning. Well, I mean, he was already where he had his best chance of winning, in London on a Bellator card, where there is no commission, and yeah. But this whole event was dog shit. And it really stood out because I haven't finished watching the Cage Warriors trilogy, but I told you before this, I said, there are some good fighters on Cage Warriors. You know, I am moderately plugged into the British MMA community, but I know I do watch a good amount of Cage Warriors when I can. I know these guys are good. And then I said the Bellator card has some local people, but not particularly good ones, except Jack Grant, who won his fight and actually looked good. But yeah, it was like pandering to local people with local fighters, but not the best fight. Like, these guys have all the money; they should be able to get the crazy thing is that, like, the Hardwick brothers, who are my boys on Facebook, but George Hardwick, he fought the librarian that MVP fought in Bellator. He fought him in Bellator immediately after MVP did. He finished him. I think in like the same amount of time as MVP. He submitted him, and they didn't hire him again. He went to Cage Warriors and scored a great body shot knockout, and then he was fighting the same night as this Bellator London event on Cage Warriors. And I know that Cage Warriors don't have the same, Viacom big dick swinging money that Bellator do, so it can't be that they were outbid. I mean, maybe George made the decision that it's probably better for his career to go to Cage Warriors, but no, it really stood out. Like, there were some really good European, not just British, but European fighters on the Cage Warriors cards. And the Bellator card was really just lazily put together, like, to pander to people. And, you know, they had Leah McCourt in the co-main. And I said last week, oh, God, that's going to be awful. And it was worse than I expected. The highlight clips that the Bellator accounts were putting out on Twitter were her missing punches. Like, that's what, because in the first round, she gets this last down. They're like, oh, she's got the judo black belt, blah, blah, blah. She gets this last down, is in the closed guard, and she lets the girl sit up and grab the Kimura. And that's not great. But when someone grabs the Kimura, we've talked about this before, you will barely ever see a Kimura finished in mixed martial arts. You will barely ever see a Kimura finished in, like, no-gi grappling. You will see Kimuras used to create scrambles and create sweeps and create attacks on arm bars and things like that. But finishing a Kimura, pretty rare. Because to finish a Kimura, you have to get the opponent's hand from in front of their body to behind their body and start putting it up their back behind them like a police arm lock. Good fighters don't let that happen. Leah McCourt let that happen twice in the first round from 2 completely different positions. She just let this girl grab the Kimura and put it all the way up her back. And, like, she had to roll off to bottom position with her arm up her back. And luckily the girl couldn't finish it. She just let go of it. But it was incredible. And then people on the Bellator live thread with like, well, that was definitely McCourt's round. You know, I value effective striking over a couple of failed submission attempts. Like, she got this close to having her shoulder torn apart because she's not very good on the ground, and you're gonna score her like the odd jab. I mean, she hit this lass something like 300 times, but the girl walked away without a mark on her. So I don't know like what she was doing. But if this is the future of the women's featherweight division, it's not bright, and I don't foresee Cyborg or Amanda Nunes having much trouble. And even better, the fight before this, it was two lads who looked like they were in slow motion, Fisher and somebody else. Fisher and Price. One was an ATT lad, one was from Scotland or something like that. But the whole way through, Big John's like, well, what, so-and-so's a southpaw, the other guy's an orthodox fighter. That's why he can't land his jab, which is normally so excellent. And the ATT guy kept reaching down to jab the body. You go, well, that's where the jab would be landing. And instead, this guy's poking him in the eye. And, you know, like the fight is eventually called because of this eye poke that keeps happening through the exact same opening that the jab would. You're like, Big John, tell me more about how that's impossible to jab against this guy. Like, I don't understand how you can be around the sport for so long and have so little interesting to say. But yeah, that was Bellator. Absolute shit show. Just a disaster. And everyone in the live thread on Reddit and everyone on Twitter was just like, oh, I'm never watching Bellator again. And we're all going to turn up for the next one and be like, oh, this is still shit. Why do I fall for this every time? But yeah, crap fights. I'm going to round it off with like 10, 20 minutes of questions because there's fuck all else going on. And then we'll talk about the upcoming fights on Boycast and hopefully some more interesting stuff. Right, let's go from the Twitter thread. Who do you think is the most fundamentally sound and well-rounded fighter in the world? I swear this is not a disguised Valentina question. I'd really like to know your opinion. There's a couple like this. Who would I have a young fighter look at? Honestly, like, I know he's hot topic at the moment, but even before last week, I would have said possibly Volkanovski. Very well-rounded, good striker, but a lot of his early work in the UFC was done with good grappling, wrestling, cage wrestling especially, and ring positioning. I would have said probably previously someone like Frankie Edgar, maybe Jose Aldo. I mean, actually, all in that division, pretty impressive. But I mean, it depends who the fighter is. You know, if they are already showing talent as a striker, you'd be more likely to say, hey, look at Max Holloway and how, as a striker, he's done so much effective work with his striking, even against guys who are like outstriking him. It's not a case where he goes, oh, I'm losing the striking, better do the wrestling, which is the case with someone like Frankie Edgar or one of those typically well-rounded fighters. Max Holloway is a rounded enough striker that he can go, I'm losing the striking, I'll do some different kinds of striking. Or if you were talking about someone trying to get takedowns, you'd say someone who is good at takedowns but cannot effectively mesh them with an MMA game. You'd say look at Frankie Edgar for takedowns out in the open. You'd say look at Habib or Dan Ige or actually there's loads of cage wrestlers, but fucking Kamaru, of course. But the people like that who box to the cage and get takedowns there. I think it depends. Like, there are a lot of elite fighters, and I think you've got to weigh up what you're already good at and look at that, look at people who are good at that, and then look at specialists for the things that you're not so great at. What modern fighter would you like to see fight in old school Pride days? And which old school fighter would you like to see rebooted in the modern era? Example, Saku learns the new striking meta so he can survive long enough to catch Kimura throws on Jared Cannonier. I was going to say Saku already. Saku with a world class. Wow, does a world class coach stop him from doing the things he was doing? That's the thing. Like, if you go to a world class camp, you're going to learn the way that the world class camp does things. I think Sakuraba probably benefited from being at. He had rigorous teaching in like the UFW dojo and stuff, but being at like Takada's gym, almost guaranteed he was the best guy in the gym. So he probably had some freedom to do whatever he wanted. Maybe I. See, like guys like Guy Mezger, he was a really well-rounded fighter back in the day, like literally the same time as Sakuraba, and he just never really got the level of success that Sakuraba did, or a lot of the guys around at the same time. And I mean, part of it is because he lost a very controversial, sketchy decision to Sakuraba in the very opening round of the 2000 Grand Prix. But Mezger would be very interesting to bring to the modern age. He's and Bas Rutten. They're sort of like the two guys from Pancrase who were good strikers and learn to grapple. I think Mezger wrestled in high school, but Murray Smith is another good example of a guy like that. But he basically mitigated his shortcomings, whereas Bas-Rutten sort of threw himself into learning the grappling, and Mezger already had some wrestling and again threw himself into learning the grappling. So maybe Mezger and Rutten, seeing them in a camp where wrestling was prioritized, and then they'd be able to learn properly, and they would be wrestling against good wrestlers all the time, and particularly in the age of wall walking, because obviously Bas-Rutten is not going to be triangling dudes in the modern era from the bottom. He's not going to be catching dudes in the Bas-Rutten neck crank. I mean, that's confirmation you're a scrub if you get caught with a Bas-Rutten neck crank. But to see him in a modern, because like that used to be the thing. You'd be like, oh, you've got to be good enough off your back because you're not going to be able to get up. And the wall walk changed all that, and the modern wall walk is a huge part of the game. So someone like Bas-Rutten or Guy Mezger, definitely. Maybe Igor at a world-class camp. Which non-ranked or lower-ranked featherweight would you pick to give Volkanovski problems? Ooh. I'm going to pull up rankingmma.com, which tends to have like hundreds of people ranked in each division. Hold on. Okay, so this is just UFC, but Ilia Topuria is number 14, and I'm very interested in his future. I mean, obviously, Ryan Hall, very different fighter to Alexander Volkanovski, but I think having watched Topuria's fights before that, I was quite interested in him. Sadiq Youssef, I'm always a big fan of, but these guys are quite highly ranked. Let's look at some guys who are like coming up. Everyone raves about Zubaira Tukugov, but then he just lost to Hakeem Dawodo. I was very big on Gavin Tucker, but again, he lost quite recently. Nate Landwehr is number 29 in the world, and he's fucking awful. But he is ranked above Amirkhani, which is very funny. Do you know what? There's guys like Ricardo Ramos who I'm like, you're very talented. I think either get a different camp or the coach needs to get like a firmer control of his reins, because he's very good, and I could see him becoming something much better, but I could also see him very easily not actualizing that potential. It'd be fucking fun to watch him against Sean Woodson, because isn't Sean Woodson like 6 foot and Volkanovski's like 5'5"? But Volkanovski's got like the Liston reach, which I keep forgetting when I'm talking about him on like preview podcasts. His reach is absurd. He's had a reach advantage on everyone he's fought recently, but he's got a height disadvantage. So like sometimes that levels out, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes like Liston versus Wepner, the guy just stands way too close and still gets blasted in the head with jabs that are like twice as long as he thought they were. I liked the lad who fought his name was Arosa. I was going to say fought Jourdain last. Yeah, Julian Arosa, he was shit hot, I thought, in his last one. I've seen him lose, obviously, but I think he's pretty bloody good. And I think that sort of pressuring style of striking would be very interesting. He's a big, strong guy. So if he can put Volkanovski's back to the fence, he can probably beat him up and force a takedown attempt. And then if he can out-wrestle the smaller man. Patreon boy here, I've got 6 months to make my striking work well enough to go with my wrestling and jiu-jitsu. The opposite of 6 months of sprawl trade. Fuck. What would you suggest to optimize this situation? Probably, obviously get a coach and work on it, but round kicks, like off the rear leg, practice throwing those at the arm and the leg, and then switch from orthodox to southpaw, do them off both legs, and just get into a situation where you can kick, get your foot back down, and duck into a clinch. Because if you throw enough kicks at people's arms, which are hard to deal, like there's not an awful lot of punishments off that, and guys aren't particularly good at catching kicks on the arm and on the high kicks. Guys can still catch kicks if you throw them like at their back. But throw some annoying kicks and duck into clinches when they come in on you. I mean, that was the thing that Matt Linland used to do tons of. He'd throw lots of high kicks in his later career and then clinch off them. Because guys don't expect the high kick off the guy who wants to clinch, and then they forget about the clinch when you've got when you've thrown up the high kick. Matt Linland's Dirty Boxing book has some really cool examples of combinations into clinches and like leaving clinches with striking combinations back into the clinch. And it's especially interesting because you can watch his fights and he actually does them. He does a lot of because he was southpaw, so a lot of left straight, right uppercut, left high kick, and various combinations of those three, and then ducking into the clinch. What are your thoughts on Joe Valtellini? Was his success primarily based on being an absolute tank? And if indeed that was the reason for his success, is that style sustainable in the current kickboxing meta? I like Bazooka Joe quite a lot. He had a very short career actually, or certainly like a short career in the truly elite of the world. But like a lot of these guys start kickboxing at like age 12. But he had his professional debut in 2010, and he was done by 2014. So very short professional career. He did kickbox amateur, but he has. He only accrued 2 professional losses, and one was to Gregory Chopin in Lion Fight, and then he did a great little run in Glory, famously beating Raymond Daniels, and then he fought Nicky Holzken and lost by TKO in the 3rd round, and then he finished his career against Marc Debont, and he's since become a commentator. He has a great YouTube channel where he teaches techniques and stuff. I think he was I mean, you said like a tank. It really helped, and he could hit well. But I'd say like a functional kickboxer. He very clearly had like a different style to a lot of the guys coming out of Holland, which is obviously a huge part of the Gold or Glory, or was a huge part of the Glory roster. There was a great clip of him teaching low kicks at the seminar, and he was like, "This one technique won me my world title." And he said, "Every time they jab, I just come back with a low kick." But I think he was also helped by Nicky Holzken taking a little while off. I mean, that Glory welterweight belt has an incredible lineage, but has also been shipped around a lot. It changes hands quite a lot. I think he'd have a lot of trouble with people like Doumbé. We never got to see him against Myrtle Groenhart. And again, Raymond Daniels, like, he improved so much. The thing about Raymond, now I've opened another can of worms, but Raymond Daniels improved a lot between the first and second Nicky Holzken fights. But like when Holzken and Valtellini beat him, he was a guy with a lot of large glaring errors. We talked about it the other week, but guys who have specialist skills or unusual skills often tend to lag behind in other areas because they're doing so well in sparring and even fighting with those unique skills. We were talking about Brian Ortega, actually. I was saying, like, he's got such a weird bag of skills, but that means that he hasn't really developed like a good wall walking game, which you would expect from anyone at a world-class level. His takedowns are pretty garbage, and those boxing into takedowns especially is really bad, and that's something that you would expect like almost any good fighter in any good MMA gym in the world to have a fairly good grasp on. But that was the case with Raymond Daniels. He had some glaring errors, and those two guys really just showed them up. So I think it was a sort of a case of like, we don't really know, because he didn't have an awful lot of fights against very tough competition, if we're honest. Wilder Fury 3, who you got and why? Plus, in a unification bout, who are you picking between the winner of that and Usyk? Oh, God. I mean, just going to start getting angry about how they didn't manage to put together that all-British unification fight again. It's making me angry, and I'm not even making money off it. I'm just annoyed someone left all that money out there. But I got to pick Fury because, he won the last 2. I mean, the first one was scored a draw, but he did win it. And that's part of the reason this is all happening. If he'd won the first fight, he could, like, Wilder would have activated his rematch clause, and then that would be all out of the way. It's because of the shitty draw. We all at the time were like, oh, forget the draw, it was a great fight. And then we had the second fight, we were like, well, that's all sorted now. But the draw literally allowed Wilder to have this rematch and throw a spanner in everything. But, you can't count out Wilder. It's very fashionable to be like, what a bum. But he's a bum who's very good at one thing, and that one thing also happens to be the only thing that really matters in heavyweight boxing. But I'm basically picking Fury over every heavyweight, including Usyk, because I've said it so many times before. But like, he grew up boxing as a kid, a gypsy kid. He was obsessed with boxing, and his parents called him Tyson because they were obsessed with boxing. His dad's a boxer, or was an ex-boxer, and he just happened to become this absolute massive freak of nature. Whereas a lot of boxing is like, you find the freak of nature. Now, Usyk did also come up through the amateur system, and he hasn't been a freak of nature his entire career. He's always been a big lad in like a room of normal people, but he's never been like Dillian White and Anthony Joshua, fucking monster-sized person. I think both Usyk and Fury are incredibly tricky, and I think that's going to be a treat for the elitist boxing fan. I don't know how much the the randomers will like it, but I'm looking forward to it. And Wilder versus Usyk is a weird fight because who's he fought? He's fought Luis Ortiz, who's a southpaw. He did well against him, but you know, it really ups all the stakes because obviously Joshua's a huge puncher, but you can't get hit once by Wilder. It's such a fucking cliche, but you have to say it every time. So it's pressure on Usyk to be perfect, but then Wilder doesn't have that ability to like take power off shots and try and pot shot with him, which brought Joshua back into the middle rounds. Famous stories about questionable camp behaviour, trying to deduce just how bizarre / typical the Strickland LFG video was. LFG? Are we talking about Orlando Sanchez? I don't know what LFG is. Lots of weird camp stories. I mean, I don't want to get too much into like gossip because like I hear all sorts of things. Like it's always weird when I see someone's fighting and I'm like, oh yeah, I know that they beat their wife. But I mean, it happens in the British boxing and MMA community. You hear stuff and it's not great. But and it's hard not to like slag people off online about it. But questionable camp behavior. I mean, it doesn't get much weirder than the fucking Lion's Den where basically it was a sex cult. No, they took the Young Lions stuff from Japanese pro wrestling, where you live and you do dishes all the time, and you live in the gym or whatever, or a gym-owned house or something like that. And I mean, I did a whole episode on Ken Shamrock, and I think I talked about this a lot. But read Jonathan Snowden's great book on Ken Shamrock. But just like the first few weeks you were at the Lion's Den training, people would just randomly come up and choke you out, and that like it wasn't the case that like they'd give you a scenario and be like, fight out of this. They'd just grab you and choke you out from behind, like, which is it's not training you for anything, it's just choking people unconscious. In 40 years, our fight is going to be more like Garn, Volk, or Adesanya. 40 years, well, we might be. These things tend to go in waves and cycles. I don't know how long like MMA is going to continue to be like an ever-changing sport. Like jiu-jitsu, I was looking at Jiu-Jitsu University, which is a great book by Salo Hibero the other day, and a lot of it, like I'd go, there's better ways to do that now, or that's not such an issue now, because things go through metas, and also like grappling is still changing at a pretty rapid rate. And that's not me saying I know better than Salo Hibero. No, I'm just saying like I know that some of the stuff that he teaches now is different from what he taught before. Like he used to teach the old Running Man Escape, and then he changed it to be more of like a Granby and stuff. But yeah, I mean, grappling is changing fast, and striking is still changing. Like people are learning tons of new stuff, and I think we're going to reach the point where, like, obviously you can't learn everything, so people are still going to be very specialized in MMA. So I don't know. I think we'll probably see a lot more people trying to be like all those three fighters, but I also think like it only takes another. Well, I mean, Kamaru's doing it, but like it only takes another couple of Habibs to come along, and everyone goes, well, the grapplers have the advantage, and I think the future is going to be all grapplers or all wrestlers, or like. 2 years ago, it was every fighter has a background, or every champion has a background in amateur wrestling. And 4 years before that, it was like, there's only one Brazilian champion left. Are they done being champions? Or are they done at the top levels of MMA? And before that, it was like, why are there no American champions? So these things just, they'll play out how they play out. And I think there'll always be a good mix. And the moment that there aren't a good mix, or like if there's 2 years where like, everyone's fighting the same and I'm not seeing different shit every day, I'll probably quit. Like the reason I love this shit is because there are so many ways to fight and do it. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. I mean, I got a decent half hour out of the content mine has collapsed on me. I am a corpse in the rubble of the content mine. People are pulling me out with the aid of a donkey. But I will return to some of these questions on Thursday because I've got a lot of them. And we'll find something interesting to talk about. But there are some fights. There are some fights that are quite interesting to me. But we are in a little bit of a dead spot with the UFC, and I really hope they buck their fucking ideas up. I mean, you as Sean Strickland or the other matchmaker who's now, or Mick Maynard, not Sean Strickland. Whoever the two matchmakers are. You're not going to work being like, I wonder how much money I can save today. No, they're there because they like good fights. So I don't know why they're just like phoning it in this couple of weeks or couple of months. Like they want to do good fights. Why are they not doing good fights? Anyway, I am your boy Jack Slack. This has been the Jack Slack podcast. If you want to sign up to the Patreon, get in on the Boycast, read the articles, read the new Advanced Striking 2.0 Jose Aldo, which I'm very proud of. Become a boy. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I've already said I'm your boy. Blessed are the blessed. Bless.